What's up, everybody? Unreal from Unreal Gaming here, coming at you with a little bit of a different video than normal. And tonight we're going to talk about Cyberpunk 2077, new game coming out on December 10th. The reason I'm going to be talking about this game is because I received some communications from a couple of friends of mine indicating that they're highly interested in the game, along with a lot of other people out there. A lot of people have been really excited about this release, but based on a couple of reviews and based on several articles leading up to the release of this game, I wanted to address this game personally with both my friends and anybody else who's a fan of my channel, either watches my Twitch streams, my YouTube channel, follows my Twitter account, what have you. In this video, as the title insinuates, this is a video chronicling reasons why you shouldn't buy Cyberpunk 2077 upon its release date. Now, I want to preface this with saying, as I often have to do on a lot of my review videos, I do not receive money from any development companies, from any review publications, from any sponsorships, whatever, that tell me you need to have a positive review of this game, you need to have a negative review of this game, whatever. This is purely my opinion, and it's going to be completely unfiltered. So my problem with Cyberpunk 2077 really ties into games of the past, and let me take everybody on a little trip down memory lane here. Cyberpunk 2077 reminds me more than anything of the original Deus Ex game. And for those of you unfamiliar, Deus Ex is a first-person shooter slash RPG game that was released in the year 2000. I think it was sometime in June of 2000, doesn't matter that much. The game was made by Ion Storm underneath Eidos Entertainment, which I believe is now owned by Square Enix Software. Anyway, the game was revolutionary for its time. It was a pretty large game, so large, in fact, that they actually had to remove certain buildings from the New York City skyline in order to get it to fit on a CD, which the first part of the game taking place in New York, everybody has the conspiracy theory, oh, the Twin Towers are missing in the city skyline of New York, and they foresaw into the future of 2055 that there were, or 2052, whatever year it was the game takes place in, that the Twin Towers have been destroyed. It's prophetic. No, they literally said later on, years later, that they couldn't fit the game onto a disc if they kept the Twin Towers in the skyline, so those were two big objects they could remove, so that, among other content, was cut. But I digress. Cyberpunk 2077 is very similar in stylistic theme and the fact that it is a first-person shooter with very heavy RPG elements, or you could even maybe make the case that it's an RPG with very heavy first-person shooter elements incorporated into it. And it's a very ambitious game. Cyberpunk even more so, because it incorporates vehicles, professions, way more voice work, way more intricate voice work. The graphics engine is going to be a lot newer. When you take a look at what Deus Ex was, the graphics engine they used was the Unreal Engine, and it was very old and on its way out at that point, dare I say. Whereas now, CD Projekt Red with Cyberpunk 2077, they're using a much newer game engine. This is the newest generation of the engine. They're not just using a rehash of the engine that they used for The Witcher 3, which is a good-looking game. But this game is supposed to blow way beyond past that, and from what the trailers have looked like, it looks great. But this game also looks like a couple of other games that I'm concerned with. And one of these next ones ties into the other, so bear with me. The next game that this reminds me of is APB, also known as All Points Bulletin. Now, for those of you who don't remember that game, All Points Bulletin was a game similar to Grand Theft Auto Online. All Points Bulletin was a Grand Theft Auto MMO before GTA 5 and GTA Online was a thing. Basically, the game was made by a development company called Real Time Worlds. They had had some success with the Crackdown series. I think the first Crackdown game was attributed to them. And they poured in $100 million. Sorry, let me say that like Dr. Evil. $100 million. Yeah, they poured in $100 million into the development of that game, and they also had the project head from Grand Theft Auto 3 working on that game, so you would have figured it would have been a recipe for instant success. And what ended up happening with that game is they released it. It was out for a total of 6 weeks, and then the company went bankrupt and the game shut down, never to return again. Actually, what I had said about APB disappearing, never to be seen again, isn't quite true. with All Points Bulletin, I believe it was a Korean company, did scoop up the rights to the game for, I think, anywhere between $1 to $3 million, which is pennies on the dollar compared to the 100 million spent on development, supposedly. And they did relaunch the game eventually, a long time later, as APB Reloaded. And I think in a worse state, quite frankly, but that's a story for another time. And that was a unprecedented disaster. Now, I liked APB. I was playing it for the entire 6 weeks. I played it all the way until the server shut down. It was a fun game. It's no Grand Theft Auto Online. That game blows it out of the water. But APB was fun for what it was. But that company went bust so fast. It was, I don't think any other MMO has lasted 6 weeks. That's the first one that I've ever heard of that lasted only 6 weeks before shutting down, especially with that kind of bankroll behind it. But they simply did not make the amount of money back they were looking for with subscription money and game sales. So there they are. And with that being said, the last game it reminds me of, speaking of Crackdown, is this game reminds me of Crackdown 3. Crackdown 3 was a game released not that long ago, actually, published by Microsoft Studios. So despite the fact that Real Time Worlds folded, Microsoft kept all the intellectual property for the Crackdown series and cranked out a couple more games. And I think the last one was made by a company called Sumo Entertainment or something like that. It doesn't really matter. No offense to you guys if you're a developer over at Sumo Entertainment. Sorry. Don't mean to offend you, but all the devs over there, it doesn't really matter. Cyberpunk 2077 reminds me of Crackdown 3 in that when you look at the pre-release announcements, any kind of stage shows that they did, trailers, they all really pumped this game up to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. They made it out to be like it's going to be a revolutionary game that's going to change the way people play other video games for years to come. And when the game was finally released, it was a buggy mess. Obviously, the gameplay that you had seen beforehand was very heavily staged and rehearsed and organized in such a way as to where it looked a lot better than it actually turned out being when somebody turned on the game and played it for themselves. There was completely brain-dead AI. The animations were old and stiff-looking. The game encountered all sorts of developmental delays, which is a lot like what happened with APB, backtracking a little bit. APB had arguably an even worse pre-release window. Besides delays in developing the game, I cannot confirm it, but rumor has it, APB also had a review embargo where they were not allowing people to review the games freely. They had certain restrictions, and rumor has it, they also had a very restricted test environment, and I don't know if it was known to the various journalists or not, but the review servers that people were put into to positively review APB, they were all populated by people who comprised of the APB development team and production team, whatever. And the people in those servers were told to behave a certain way to make the game play out a certain way for those people reviewing it. So it was a very controlled environment and didn't necessarily represent the game that you and I were going to play. And that became evident only upon release. Cyberpunk 2077 kind of shook out to be similar in that regard. I won't say the same, but similar. And here's why. We're just starting to see the reviews of Cyberpunk 2077 just now. Now, this is only 3 days before the release. Steam actually has the release date of 12/9. It's now 12/7 as I narrate this. But the official release date is 12/10, so we're, 3 days out from the release right now. And now we're just getting a taste of what's going on. And if you look chronologically as to what's been happening with this game, we've encountered multiple delays, and we've had a lot of red flags coming up here. So let's take a look at the red flags, shall we? So first red flag is the delay. Okay, I can buy a game development studio wants to take the tactic of making sure their game is as good as it possibly can be, so let's delay the game, make sure it comes out right the first time rather than give you a, complete botched release and scramble to fix it afterwards. Okay, I understand that. Second red flag was, despite the fact that they gave the studio a delay in releasing the game, sources from the development studio leaked some information to the press and said that they have been crunching nonstop for months and that the delay wasn't nearly going to be enough time to fix the game to the point where it needs to be for release. Third red flag. The developers have confirmed a patch, initially reported to be 43.5 gigabytes in size on day one of the release. Now IGN and I believe PC Gamer both, at least IGN, confirmed the size to be 50 gigabytes in size for a game that's a base install size of 70 gigabytes. And this patch is only going to be for stability issues, which, according to the next red flag, the reviews coming out of the review embargo, if you want to call it that, have said is not the chief problem. The chief problem is actually going to be game-breaking glitches from various mechanics not working, graphical design issues, UI issues, stuff like that. And let me just read to you a list here. I poured over the reviews of both IGN and PC Gamer, the PC version of the game specifically, because another red flag, by the way, IGN did not receive any console copies of this game at all. All they received is a PC copy. They haven't got one for the PS4, the Xbox One, the Xbox Series X, or the PS5. Nothing. Or Stadia. I actually don't even know if there's a Stadia version coming out, nor do I care, frankly. But let's go over the mechanics in here that have got the folks over at PC Gamer so rattled, and I don't blame them. So let's first go over the list, and this is a direct quote from PC Gamer. I don't want to get this wrong. This is from James Davenport, the features producer. Game-breaking issue number 1. Various NPC scripting errors waiting for a character to initiate dialogue or move to a new location, etc. in order for the mission to progress. User interface elements don't disappear without quitting to the main menu, such as weapon crosshairs, item pickup notifications, bespoke UI elements from braindance sequences. Unable to sprint or jump without loading the last save, stuck on geometry mid-mission, can't climb out and forced to reload the last save, elevator user interface not loading, elevator door not opening, enemy spawning within solid objects behind impassable surfaces, forcing a reload, field of view stuck at zoom level after some cutscenes, forcing a reload, unable to change weapons and inventory without reloading the previous save, children spawning in front of a shooting gallery, cowering and screaming, and also making it impossible to partake in the shooting gallery, because the character will automatically lift their gun around children. And that's only the critical issues that are considered game-breaking. There's an even longer list of non-game-breaking issues that I'm not going to dive into. I'll leave a link in the description that you guys can follow, where you can read the review for yourself and look at the entire list of issues. IGN went on to release a whole swath of images of various graphical glitches, some of which I would consider ridiculous. Some of them I can understand to an extent. You know, I've had various graphical issues in all sorts of different games. My review of Red Dead Redemption 2 for the PC, I showed off a couple of them. And I understand a game when it first comes out is going to have glitches. I get it. But the degree of glitches that we're seeing here, the number of glitches that we're seeing here in Cyberpunk 2077 are not giving me a lot of hope. And I'm not going to be able to repost the images here, unfortunately, because they belong to IGN. But what I will do is, once again, put a link in the description for the IGN review article so you guys can read it for yourselves. But it features people stuck in the T-pose, NPCs going like this, putting their arms out to their sides and standing up perfectly straight, which is the pose that people use for character model development in video games. It features a NPC sitting in a vehicle with its head stuck through the roof. Weapons floating in midair, somebody taking a drink from an invisible glass, somebody trying to board a helicopter, and they boarded it by sitting outside the helicopter and levitating in midair, summoning a motorcycle, which is halfway embedded in another vehicle, or watching a character walk and talk to you by not walking or talking, just basically having a static character model sit there and levitate forward as if it was pushed by some kind of a magnetic force or something like that. So we're looking at some pretty serious glitches here, and not just graphical in nature. And on top of all of that, on top of the graphical glitches, on top of the red flags with development, on top of the damning quote, quite frankly, from PC Gamer saying, and I quote, "Something went awry in every single side and story mission," end quote. Besides all of that, we also have to look at the performance aspect of the game. What kind of performance do we get with modern computers here? Now, I understand that not everybody is able to get their hands on a top-end graphics card right now, especially if you're looking for the GeForce 3080, 3090, the Radeon 6800, Radeon 6900, etc., that's going to continue to be the case for a long time. We're looking at horrible supply levels for both companies right now. Both AMD and NVIDIA can't give us graphics cards in a timely fashion. I don't think we're going to be getting swaths of new graphics cards for a long time, probably not until summer, maybe even fall of next year. So unfortunately, despite the fact that I would love a GeForce 3080, I'm still stuck on a 1070. But that should be okay, right? If you go to the recommended system requirements in Steam, I mean, right here it says underneath recommended tab, NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1060 or AMD Radeon R9 Fury would be recommended. Okay, great. I can surpass that, no problem, right? Well, not so much. Once again, referring back to some of these reviews, people who are reviewing this game hands-on, getting real experience with this, have said that they're running it with beasts of PCs. PCs that have GeForce 3080s in them, cards that we're not going to get our hands on, you and me, until next year. And they're still struggling to hit a good frame rate, and that's without ray tracing being turned on. Turning on ray tracing, which is a special effect that NVIDIA has been working very closely with CD Projekt Red on, lowers the frame rate even more, where the game is only playable if you have a 3080 or higher. The website Tom's Hardware shows a nice handy graph of what you can expect for frame rates based on what kind of a video card you have and what kind of settings you use. It's not looking pretty. Performance-wise, it looks like it's going to be the new torture test, the new crisis, if you will. The problem is, despite the pretty environments, when you look at the character and vehicle models, this is not a new crisis. This is not the prettiest game that I've seen. And when you have those kind of performance numbers with that kind of hardware, with these kinds of visuals, I'm not very hopeful. So circling all the way back to the beginning, Cyberpunk 2077 may be a great game once it's stabilized. And if you really think about it, considering that the story of its development is what it is, the campaign is going to be as epic as it is based on the reviews, and the prospect of having a multiplayer that is going to be delayed as far as a year, this game may turn out to be the next Deus Ex, for better or for worse. So that's my spiel. I appreciate you all for watching. It remains to be seen whether or not I'm going to play Cyberpunk 2077 when it comes out. I actually think I probably will be getting a copy of it just for review purposes, because I'd like to get my hands on it myself and see what all the fuss is about and see if the glitches really are as bad as they say they are. Again, there is going to be a 50 gigabyte patch coming out on day one. What that's actually going to address and fix, I don't know. But for those of you who play video games casually and are considering whether or not to get this game on launch, I'd be very hesitant to do so based on the information that we have right now. It may be worth waiting a few months until things get ironed out the way that they should. I appreciate you all watching. Thank you so much for tuning in. Check me out on my social media platforms, youtube.com/UnrealGaming. Check me out on Twitch, twitch.tv/Unreal_Twitch, my Twitter account @UnrealOfficial. Until next time, I'm Unreal. You just watched the preview with an average gamer. You guys take care.